Greetings and peace. I would like to start this with Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, in the name of Allah, the Beneficent, the Most Merciful, and Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu. Peace be with you and yours. And also with the NUR Fatimiya Sufi greeting, Nur alaikum, upon you be light. Today's presentation we will discuss Frantz Fanon and also his book, Black Skin, White Masks. From the Fanonian perspective, I will also incorporate the 19 commandments of the NUR Fatimiya Sufi order and how they are addressed from the Fanonian perspective. So I hope you enjoy this, and I represent myself only. This presentation is intended strictly for educational, free speech, and entertainment purposes. It represents an interpretive summary of Frantz Fanon's work, Black Skin, White Masks, and related ethical reflections, not an authoritative or exhaustive replacement for reading the original text itself. Viewers are encouraged to engage directly with the primary sources, and I will put the links in the description below for you to do that. This presentation is respectfully dedicated to Sheikh Wahid Azal of the NUR Fatimiya Sufi order, in recognition of his teachings on inner liberation, ethical responsibility, spiritual awakening, and justice, which resonate deeply with the emancipatory concerns explored by Frantz Fanon. Frantz Fanon, who lived from 1925 to 1961, was a psychiatrist from Martinique, philosopher, and revolutionary thinker whose work examined the psychological effects of colonialism, racism, and domination. Educated in France and later practicing psychiatry in Algeria, Fanon experienced colonial racism both personally and professionally. Fanon's ideas matter today because colonial power structures and racial hierarchies continue to shape identities, institutions, and global inequalities. His work remains foundational for studies of race, post-colonial theory, liberation psychology, and struggles for racial justice. In Black Skin, White Masks, Fanon investigates how racism operates not only socially and politically, but psychologically. He analyzes how colonial domination distorts self-perception, language, desire, and identity among both the colonized and the colonizer. Rather than offering abstract theory, Fanon combines philosophy, psychoanalysis, lived experience, and political critique. His goal is liberation, freeing the black subject from internalized inferiority and freeing humanity from the myths that sustain racial domination. Fanon argues that language is never neutral in colonial societies. Speaking the colonizer's language often becomes associated with intelligence, civility, and worth, while native languages are treated as inferior or primitive. This linguistic hierarchy pressures colonized people to distance themselves from their own culture in order to gain acceptance. Fanon shows how this dynamic produces alienation, as the black subject is rewarded for approximating whiteness rather than being recognized as fully human. Oh, you speak English really good. So that's basically one of those assertions that are made. One of Fanon's most powerful insights concerns the experience of being seen through the quote-unquote white gaze. The black body becomes overdetermined by stereotypes, myths, and fears imposed from outside. This gaze fractures bodily self-awareness. Instead of inhabiting the body naturally, the black subject experiences themselves as an object, constantly scrutinized and defined by racial meaning imposed by colonial society. Now we examine the Fatimiya Sufi order 19 commandments from the eyes of Frantz Fanon. So we look at the first one, which is know thyself and awaken. This commandment emphasizes inner awakening and self-knowledge as the foundation of liberation. Fanon's work mirrors this by insisting that black liberation must begin with confronting internalized racism and false self-images. Fanon's call to descend into the zone of non-being reflects this awakening, an inward reckoning that strips away imposed identities so authentic selfhood and dignity can emerge. The second commandment, rend the veils of empty form. This commandment argues and urges rejection of hollow rituals and external idols. Fanon similarly critiques colonial myths, scientific racism, and superficial liberalism that claim universality while sustaining domination. By exposing these false forms, Fanon teaches that liberation requires dismantling ideological structures that masquerade as progress while preserving inequality. Commandment 3, Obedience to the Inner Truth. This teaching centers obedience to inner truth rather than imposed authority. Fanon exemplifies this by rejecting colonial institutions even when they offer prestige or acceptance. His resignation from colonial psychiatry in Algeria demonstrates allegiance to ethical truth over professional security, aligning inner conviction with action. Commandment 4, Be true to thyself. Authenticity is central to both Fanon and this commandment. Fanon condemns assimilation that demands self-denial in exchange for conditional acceptance. He argues that true freedom arises only when one refuses to live as a mask for someone else's expectations. Commandment number 5, Fearlessness. Fear sustains oppression. Fanon shows how colonial systems rely on fear to discipline bodies and minds. Liberation, for Fanon, requires courage to confront both external violence and internalized self-contempt. Commandment number 6, Love thyself unselfishly. This commandment reframes self-love as ethical responsibility. Fanon insists that self-hatred, produced by racism, prevents genuine solidarity. Healing the fractured self is therefore a prerequisite for a collective liberation. Commandment number 7, Justice and Integrity. Fanon relentlessly exposes justice in colonial law, medicine, and culture. His insistence on integrity demands confronting uncomfortable truths rather than maintaining polite illusions of harmony. Commandment number 8, Thoughts, Words, and Deeds. Fanon demonstrates how racist myths begin as thoughts, are reinforced through language, and enacted through violence. Transformation therefore requires ethical discipline at every level of consciousness and action. Commandment number 9, Detachment from Possession. Colonial society equates worth with proximity to white material culture. Fanon critiques this fixation. He argues that true liberation cannot be purchased through symbols of colonial success. Commandment number 10, Reject superficiality. Fanon criticizes the shallow optimism of colonial humanism that ignores lived suffering. Depth, not surface reconciliation, is required for genuine human transformation. Commandment number 11, Be a light, not a sheep. Fanon exemplifies moral leadership by challenging dominant narratives. He encourages oppressed peoples to think critically rather than internalized imposed explanations. Commandment number 12, Speak truth despite heresy. Fanon's work was often labeled dangerous or extremist, yet his refusal to soften truth for comfort embodies this commandment. Commandment number 13, Love as the root of justice. Fanon's humanism is rooted in a radical love that demands justice. This love refuses sentimental unity and insists on structural change. Commandment number 14, No exclusive creeds. Fanon rejects racial essentialism and closed identities. He envisions a humanity beyond rigid categories imposed by colonial thinking. Commandment number 15, No theocratic or authoritarian power. Fanon warns against replacing colonial domination with new forms of tyranny. Liberation must transform structures, not merely change rulers. So besides the 15th commandment of the NUR FSO, this also is in alignment with what Sheikh Wahid says about having a third force. So it's not about the Western Anglo powers to be in charge or the Eurasian bloc of the East to be in charge, as they all have their own agendas and injustices. We need a third middle ground force, the middle pillar and the middle path. Commandment number 16, Friendship with all peoples. Fanon insists on solidarity across racial and national lines. His vision of humanity affirms dignity in all cultures. And besides the NUR FSO, the Ismailis, the Nizari Ismaili Shias, also insist on pluralism, that pluralism is what will heal and fix our society and world. Commandment number 17, defend the oppressed. Fanon sides unequivocally with the oppressed against systematic violence. He views neutrality in the face of injustice as being complicit. Commandment number 18, transforming suffering into consciousness. Fanon transforms personal and collective suffering into political insight. Pain becomes a source of clarity rather than resignation. Commandment number 19, liberation as ongoing practice. Fanon rejects final solutions or static identities. Freedom, like this commandment, is a continual ethical and psychological practice. Here are the further references and readings that I recommend, including Frantz Fanon's Black Skin, White Masks, and also works by Angela Davis. And I also recommend the work The Racial Contract from Professor Charles W. Mills. And besides all that, I will put the link in the description below for not only the book, but also where you can get the 19 commandments of the Fatimiya Sufi order. And you see how it would be interpreted from Fanon's perspective as I did in this presentation. So I hope you all enjoyed this as much as I did. Thank you for listening, and of course, liberation begins with consciousness. Thank you for watching. If any questions or comments, please email me at salmansheikh911@gmail.com. And of course, my videos and the purpose of it is under the copyright laws of fair use, which covers it for the purpose of nonprofit, free speech, education, and entertainment purposes. Thank you. All rights reserved.